So earlier when we were working on the bullet, there was one small mistake, and that was that, let's go back here to that folder. The case, I was applying the brass with our UV selection. And I actually want to do that here with the element mode. So now, before, you can see here, it didn't pick off this because it's its own unwrap. So now with that, we make sure that everything is brass that is supposed to be brass, and everything else can stay the way it is. So let's see what we do next. So the next material that we're gonna apply is also one of the most important ones, because if we look here at our reference image, it's covering most of the revolver. So including our cylinder, we have this dark material here, and this is basically the coating that they put on top of the metal. And then we have some parts here like the hammer and our trigger and these pieces here that we're gonna mask out and have a nice contrast with it. So the question we need to ask is whether we want this to be metallic or non-metallic. You might think that since it's a paint, it should be non-metallic, but it's actually not as easy to answer. There is an interesting thread here on Polycount whether we should be using metallic values for painted gunmetal. And as one user here writes, the parkerizing process has a finish on it that is still considered metallic due to the chemical breakdown. So as you can see, a lot of discussion, very interesting to read up on it. And to give you a simple answer, I want it to be non-metallic for now, because we also gonna have our metallic edgeware around. But we can always see later whether it makes sense to keep it that way or whether we should change it to having some metallic values. It might even that we only have a percentage of it, that we don't go either full metallic or non-metallic, but for now I want it to be non-metallic, and then we can always see later if we like it or not. So the material that I want to be using is a smart material, and it's the steel gun painted. So let's put that above our metal base, and then let's also expand it to see what we got inside the folder. And as you can see, we got quite a little bit of wear and tear on it. And the interesting thing is that whoever made that material by Algorithmic, they actually considered this coating that we were just talking about to be metallic. So as you can see, everything is metallic aside from our plastic grip. But like I was just saying, I want to see how far we can get with having it as non-metallic, the paint. And then later we can always change our mind once we have the final composition and it's really just a slider. So let's go into the material properties. You can see it looks a bit different than your usual material. For example, we have 2 color slots. So it gives us a bit more of a customized control in general. And then upon further scrolling down, we get our metallic slider here. So putting that to non-metallic brightens everything up, because adding metallicness automatically makes everything more dark. So we have to compensate for that by making the color, the albedo, more dark. And this scratches layer, let's just toggle it off for now, because we're gonna add our own wear and tear on top. So with the scratches layer disabled, we only have this one layer left here that basically drives everything. And as you can see, there's actually quite a bit of information on there. So let's take a look here in our roughness to see where that actually comes from. If we toggle on and off these fill layers, we can see that this one here in particular has a lot of information, and this is actually something that we want to keep that way. This is in the roughness only, if we toggle over here to our other channels, we can see that there is also a little bit of a grain. But this is actually coming yet again from a different map, which is these spots here. So we could also further adjust that if we wanted. But overall, this is actually doing a pretty good job. The only issue is that right now this is all a little bit too strong, these little patches that we have here. So let's also put this fill layer back on, and then let's go into these properties here and let's just dial that down a bit. So I'm gonna have this here at 0.2, and this one here I also want to take it down, maybe around here. So we still have a little bit of these spots, and that's also something that we want to have to just add a little bit more interest here to that texture. So next, let's go back here into our base layer, and then let's bring that color down. So first, this one here, let's take it around here, 0.15, and then we have another, and let's also bring that one down here. As you can see, even if we bring it down all the way, we still don't have it as pitch black, and that's because of our roughness information. However, we don't really want to have it that black. Like you can see here, that is very dark now, and this is a bit of a problem if we would export that over to like a game engine, where those things then can easily create some green fragments. So we want to put that back up here, and I'm gonna have it at 0.2 as well. Yeah, it doesn't have to be perfectly exact, so let's have it around here. And now let's go over here to our roughness and let's make that more glossy. So I'm gonna have it around 0.4, and that way we have a really nice shine here on that material. And if we compare that with our reference image, we can also see that this is not like a super pitch black color. If you would look at it, you would probably think, oh yeah, this is black, but it's actually not. It has some gray in there. It's definitely not a black. And then of course we also have our roughness on it, which makes it reflect. So those are the things that we're now compensating for. You could even say there's a bit of like a blue tone in there, but this is, you know, this can also be based on that picture here. Maybe there's something in the background that makes it a little bit of a blue tint. So these are things that are based here on a picture. For example, here it looks different than it does here. This here is like a studio picture. This one here, maybe it's even a different paint on there. Who knows? This one here is definitely more dark looking. And this one here, yet again, looks rather bright. So it's often a matter of trying to find some balance, you know, like trying to take a look at these reference images and then we decide what we like the best. For example, here it looks almost gray. So these are the things that we have to take into account. And for now, we have a nice base here. It's always important to change the lighting as well, to get a good angle on it and see it here, how our roughness also works on it. So sometimes it's not as clear if we just look at it like this, and you really want to change the camera position around a bit to get to see the whole picture. So now what we want to do is copy that metal folder that we were creating before the coating, and then we're gonna mask the parts that are appearing as metal here. So let's do that. Let's collapse our painted gun, and then let's just take this folder here. We can leave this here basically at the bottom, because essentially this is already a texture version for us. If we disable that here, then we have the metallic version of the gun. It's rather simple because it's all the same. But if we are looking at this version here, we want to have a masked out metal on top of it. So let's take it, copy layers, and then let's paste that here on top. So maybe we want to also give that a different name. Let's call that metal parts. And then let's just hide this layer here for now, even though it doesn't make a difference. Sometimes the normal information that's in those folders under it kind of shine through, and then you would have to change it or disable the hide. But in that case, it actually doesn't make a difference. So let's put a black mask on that. And now let's go over here to our polygon fill, and let's just go over here to the element mode. As always, we want to take a look at our reference images to identify where we have metal and where not. So let's go over here to this version of the gun, and that way it's easier to select these parts here. For our cylinder, this one here is already attached to that part that we were just selecting. So this is also metal. And then let's go ahead here with our barrel. And the barrel also has this element here, this ring around it. Let's also select these pieces here, as well as our trigger. And this piece, I'm actually gonna just leave it as it is so that we have some extra contrast there. So now there are also some pieces here, like these screws. And if I look at our reference image, or this one here, we can see that this is a bit more of a darker metal. Same here for this screw. So what I want to do is duplicate this metal parts folder here once more. And then I'm gonna call that darker metal parts. Let's overwrite this mask. And then we can go over here to our brush. And let's stamp that down here. Oh, it needs to be a white brush. Like that. And now let's go into the properties here for that darker metal folder, which right now is the same as this one. And we just want to bring that color down a bit. Doesn't have to be too much. If we do too much, it really becomes black. So we don't want to do that. So let's have it somewhere around here for some nice contrast. Also, we have this one here, and then this one. Let's select that here from that side, because that's where we have the UV information. That way we also have a bit of color contrast there. For that piece, I want to do the same thing. Also stamp that with this darker metal. And then we also have this piece here. Let's go here to this version where we don't have anything in the way. Let's stamp that down there. We can also do this here. As well as here on that side. And then of course we also have it here on top. So let's increase the size a bit. Just want to make sure I have it perfectly aligned. This one here is a bit smaller. Okay. Let's see where else we got some metal. We also have this piece here. That can be metal as well. And now we also have these pieces here. But for these pieces, let's take a look here at our reference. So as we can see, this is actually a brighter metal. So we want to duplicate that folder once again. And for that, let's go ahead. Let's also give it a proper name here. Brighter metal. And now let's not forget to override our current mask. And then in our brush mode, let's just make a stamp here randomly with a white brush so that we see how this material looks like once we change the color. And this has a bit of orange or yellowish tint, I would say. Another thing that I want to do for that one, I want to put the roughness down a bit. So I'm gonna have it more around here just to change it up a bit. Maybe it's a little bit too less now. Let's put that around 0.4. So now let's just overwrite that once more. And then let's go ahead here and do our stamp. And the same here. But now we have these tiny pieces here that are actually from this other metal. So now if we look at it, we basically cut that out. So what we have to do is go back here to this part. And we just want to fill that up here so that we have metal information here all around. And by the way, this material here, we can also apply it to some other parts which you may have already spotted on the reference image. We have these extra dots here. So let's also take care of that now. So I want to go back here to the compact view where we have everything combined. And then with the reference image opened on my secondary monitor, and also let me show you the brush size I'm using. I'm gonna stamp down here and I actually have it set to black. Let's put it to white. And also I'm on the wrong layer. We want to be on that one. Now on the bright metal, let's put it around here. Just want to make sure not to accidentally stamp on this other element. And then I'm gonna make it a bit smaller, 1.2, based on what I see there on that reference image. And then the other one is even smaller. I'm gonna have it at 1.1. Or maybe even smaller. Let's have it at 1.05. And this one I'm gonna stamp around here. And this is still looking too big. I'm gonna have it here at 1, the brush size. So now these details are in place. And I'm just gonna go back here to the dark metal, because back here to that view, we actually want to have this here as a brighter metal. And in that case, this one here is actually the one that we want. So I'm gonna have the brush around that size, and you can see that the bake didn't come out nice because there is some distortion on it. I forgot to do that with this painting mode that we have, the Screw Painter in Marmoset. But the good thing is we can always go back bake again, re-import the textures, and that will automatically get that fixed here in Substance Painter. So even if I don't have it right now, this is what we can do in order to get that fixed. I'm gonna go here to our dark metal, and I actually want to have the full front side as metallic. Let me be in the element mode here for our UV selection to make sure we have everything. And also here for our rear side, this tiny piece, I also want to have that to metallic for some extra contrast. And since we're at it, this element here, I see that this actually appears to be bright. So let's put that here together with this bright material. We can also go to the full screen mode every once in a while. Take a good look around. Look at it here from different lighting angles. So there's one more thing, even though it might not be in the reference images, but I want to have a bit of a brushed look here on this rail. So for that, I'm gonna go over here to our details folder, and in here, it doesn't matter whether it's a fill layer or a standard layer. We're gonna add one here. So in that case, just a standard layer. And then I'm gonna call that brushed lines. And what I want to do is add a fill. No, actually a filter. This time it's a filter. And let's search for brushed. And then we get this one here. So applying that will apply it to everything. And the properties here make no difference if you had put a fill layer. It's all driven here by the filter itself. So we go over here and we want to disable everything aside from normal and height. And then we have to put that here into a group. Let me just call it the same. And we want to have a black mask on it. Let's go over to our UV tool. And we select it here based on UV chunk fill for this area here. And also select the one on top of it. And I also want to have it here for these parts. And also here at the back. So right now this is a bit too strong. What I want to do is go back in here and bring that intensity down to maybe around here. So it's really subtle, but we have this now here as part of our normal map information, as you can see here. And that way this looks a bit more interesting as opposed to before. Maybe I'm gonna increase it a slight bit, 0.15. So now it has a bit more contrast. So let's close this folder here and let's get back to our darker metal, because I forgot to also stamp that screw that we have here at the bottom of the grip. The only problem is that right now that folder is under our grip. So what we want to do is put that over it. And because we did only masking on it, this is not going to cause any issues here. So now we can go in there and give that a stamp. And now we have this here also in our mask and normal map information, as well as the metallicness. So another thing that I want to do related to this metal, but in that case here, the metal parts, which we have for that, is to add a bit more of the dirt. So for these individual elements, I want to increase that, and in our mask builder here, on that mask for the dirt, let's put that here up to 0. maybe around 0.65. And you can see now we have a bit more here of this staining going on, also here on these parts. And that way, if I look here at our reference image, it's matching that a bit better here, where we also have some staining going on. So there's one more thing that I want to add here to the darker metal parts. And that is this small detail that we were adding here to the inside of that. So let's also give this here some metallic information. And that way this looks better here. And there is something that I just noticed that I didn't see before. There are some weird errors here, and they come from this normal detail folder. So somehow this sneaked its way in there, and in order to get rid of it, let's add a white mask. And then I want to go over here to our normal view, because that's where we see it the best way here. So it's always important to scan all the channels for errors like that. And there was another one here where somehow the logo also got on there. So in that case, I'm just going to go over here to that mode. Let's put that to black and just make sure that this here has no issues. Actually, we can select everything here. Oh, no, we can't, because that would also get rid of this information here. So only select it here at these faces. And don't be here in the element mode, or else this disappears. So there was another one in here. It's a bit mysterious because we were in the UV mode when we did everything. So I'm not 100% sure how that happened, but somehow it ended up in there. And as far as I can see, these were the only cases. I don't see it anywhere else. So now let's get out of this mode here, back into our brush mode, and let's go back to the dark metal folder once more. So into that mask here. And the reason is that this tiny element here should also have some metallic information. In retro perspective, I think we should have just stamped that in here in Substance Painter and not went through the trouble to add that in Blender, because we spent quite a little bit of work on this detail. But let's just book it under practice. So maybe there's more as we go, but for now I think we pretty much got most of it here. And now let's see what we can do for our wear and tear. So one of the most important is going to be our metal edge wear. That's gonna wrap nicely around all these edges here for everything that is now a coated part here. And for that, let's copy our metal base actually. Control D to make a duplicate. And I'm gonna call this metal edge wear to keep it simple. And then let's drag this here on top under the bullet. So we can already activate it. And now what we want to do is put that into a new folder. Maybe we also gonna call that here edgeware masking. We actually gonna have two masks, because on this upper folder we need to get rid of the ones that we don't want to have affected, which is mainly the grip here. So let's go to polygon fill. Let's put that to element mode, and then we want to have this to black. And now we have this here excluded from the rest. So now if we add a black mask to it, we can then add a generator, and we want to have the metal edge wear. So this is one of the most powerful generators, I would say, especially when it comes to hard surface stuff. We always make use of the metal edgeware, and it's also highly customizable. So let's look at our wear and tear now in combination with this generator. So the most obvious one is probably the wear level, and that's gonna affect everything that's under it with just this one global slider here. So that way we can affect how much we want to have left of it. If we put it all the way up, you can see that the paint is almost entirely gone. And let's just keep it at the default at 0.75 for now. So the most important thing to understand about this generator here, and that's not only for our metal edgeware but in general, is that it looks at our curvature information as an input map, and the grunge is gonna add it on top of that. So if we put the grunge amount all the way down, then it's purely what it gets from our texture here. Mostly from our curvature map, but it also combines it a bit with the AO information and some of the other maps that we baked out. But this here is pretty much the default pristine edgeware look. And then with our grunge control, let's just put it back to the default value of 0.3. With that grunge, we can then either add or subtract information on top of that. So that gives us then this randomized look. And now we're gonna tweak that a little bit more. So another important one is the use triplanar, and enabling that will minimize any potential UV seams that we have here. It might not be so obvious if we enable it now, but let's just put it on. So now we have triplanar enabled, and it just does the possibly best job on eliminating any obvious UV seam problems where we have our islands. So turning that on is usually a thing that we want to have. It will be a bit more obvious on the next generator we're gonna use. But now we got a bit of a different look here because of that. It seems almost like we got a bit more noise. So what we can do about that is changing our grunge scale. If we put that all the way up here, you can see that it becomes even noisier. It becomes very small, the grunge that works as a mask here on top of our curvature. So what I like to do is putting that down here. It was at 4. Now if we put it to 2, you can see that we have more of a unique and bigger patterns. And this is really what I would expect here from a gun like that. So putting it to 1 will make it even bigger, but I think it looks pretty good here with 2. So even though this is looking pretty cool, it's not really the kind of look that we're after. We don't want to have so much wear and tear, but now we have a nice base, and now we're gonna add more on top of that. So let's go ahead and add another generator here. And this one is going to be the mask builder. So this one here already comes with also a predefined look. It has grunge on it. It has also our edgeware on it. So right now it's overwriting anything that's under it. If we take a look here at our mask and we toggle that on and off, then here we have our edgeware, and here we have basically the new generator that we now added on top of it. So what we can do here is to also tweak that a bit. Let's make it a bit more intense. So we're gonna add that here to 7.5. Also maybe add a bit more grunge here. So overall, let's just saturate that a bit more here. And now, by the way, take a look at this part here. And now let's see what happens if we put that to triplanar. You can see that now it's doing a better job as opposed to before, where we have this obvious seam here. Same goes for here. So wherever we have those things, the triplanar will fix it as good as it possibly can. While it might not be 100% perfect if we're zoomed in all the way, it definitely does a better job. So this is the reason why we want to have this triplanar enabled. It just makes everything a bit more continuous. So now we have our mask builder here. And with these settings here, what we can do is put that to multiply. And that way it will subtract the information that's under it. So we're gonna do that now. And now if we toggle that on and off, you can see this is how it looked like before. And this is what we got now. Before it was almost like continuous, and now it's a bit more unique here, like some parts don't have it, other parts have it. But overall, it's still way too much. So maybe let's zoom in over here to make it even more obvious. This is all a little bit too strong and still too much all around the edges. So we want to add more variety to that. So let's go back to our material view and see what we got. And right now, this is actually a bug. What it really looks like is if we disable that and re-enable that, now we get the actual view. I have no idea why it didn't display that properly, but this here is actually the view where we have our mask builder here subtracting from the metal edgeware that's under it. This here is without it, and this here is with it enabled. So now what we want to do is add a third layer, and this time it's going to be a fill layer. So let's go over here to grayscale, and you want to be searching for Grunge 001. So let's add that. And now with this one enabled, let's take a look at our mask view. So if you're looking for the triplanar button, in that case we don't have one, but if we go up here to the projection mode, we can switch it to triplanar, and you can see that now it attempts to do the job even though it's not perfect in some areas. So for that particular mask, I tried it with the triplanar on and off, and I actually prefer it without it. And by the way, you can also put it to the spherical projection, and you can see how it really wraps all the way around. So it's a matter of trying out these different modes, but I'm gonna put it back here to the UV projection and put it to multiply. And as you can see, we get this really nice effect now where some areas just have randomly less than other areas. And we can also further increase that by actually putting our balance down here. So I'm gonna put that here to 0.3. And now we really get this nice unique look here for our edgeware, and that's exactly the kind of thing that we're after here. To not have it so generic looking, but more uniquely. And we can also further increase our contrast. That way we get even more of that. And then, of course, let's not forget to look at it here in the most important view, our material view. So now we got a nice overall look here with our edgeware, but there might be a few areas where it actually doesn't look as nice as we would want it to be. We could, of course, do some customized hand painting on our mask, but usually I try to get it as good as possible with our procedural masking. And for that, I want to take another look here, for example, at this area, and there's a good chance it looks completely different on your end. Maybe it looks perfectly fine, but here in my case, I don't like how this looks. So what I like to do is first of all go back here to this view and then hit that randomize seed button. So now you can see that it changes the overall look here, but it's still based on the same numbers that we have. It's just basically offsetting everything to a different number, which is a random. So now this here actually looks better as it did before. We even get like some grunge in here. So it's really just a matter of trying out different looks and not get too accustomed to only this one particular look. Like this here still looks great, everything looks good, and this area here even looks better as it did before. So in that case, it made sense to hit that random button, and if we don't like it, we can always press Ctrl Z to get back to the old mode. So I sometimes just randomly click here, like the name suggests, on that button till I got that one kind of a look that I really like. And in that case here, I don't see a reason to further click it. I like it as it is. So let's take another look here at our reference image. And one thing that's quite iconic to the revolvers is that they have this sort of like a scratching line here where the cylinder is. And even though I don't own a revolver, I guess it originates here from this element where it sort of like scratches against. So in order to have that, we're gonna hand paint that in, and we're gonna do that by once again right clicking our black mask, and then we're gonna add a paint layer. So what I want to do is go over to our alpha and let's search for grunge, but not with an E, because they named those here grungy. So I'm gonna select this one here. And now let's go over to our 2D view. And then let's find our cylinder. In that case, it's easy to find because it's this iconic shape here. And then I'm just gonna put it also here on our 3D view so we see what we're doing. And then with that brush, let's take a look here at our settings for it. First, I'm gonna put it to UV mode. And then what I also want to do is add some jitter to it. Otherwise, we got these repetitive steps. So I'm gonna put this here to 20. I'm gonna put it everywhere to 20. Angle jitter. And let's try without the position jitter first. Here's my brush size, and I'm gonna take it all the way down, maybe to 0. Let's try 0.4. Gonna switch the brush to being white, and then let's make this line here by pressing Shift. And now this actually looks, I would say, too repetitive and also is too big. So I'm gonna undo that. And I wanna go over here to our full screen view. So let me go back here to this jitter. And I wanna also add some position jitter so that it has a bit of random steps in there. Now let me put the brush size to 0.2 and let's try that again. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. So I'm gonna make that stroke again to make it a bit bigger. Let's take a look. Actually, the second stroke maybe was not even necessary. So I'm gonna undo that. And I'm thinking this is actually already all that we need for it. So let me just compare that once more. Looks about right. So let me get out of this brush mode because we still have this grungy brush assigned to it. Just gonna press X and then let's filter for our shape. And now we have our default brush back. So what I want to do is close that folder here, the Edgeware. And then on top of that folder, let's create a new one. And this one I'm gonna call Global Wear and Tear. And in that folder, we're gonna create a few more wear and tears just to have more variety here on our texture. So I'm going to create a new folder, drag it in there, and this one is going to be our oil stains. Next, I'm going to have another one. Let's call this one dust. And then we're going to have a third one that we're going to call dirt. So now let's start with our oil stains here, the one at the bottom. And I want to add a fill layer into that. And that fill layer I'm going to put to a dark tone. So now, most importantly, if we change our roughness information, we make that more glossy here. If we put it all the way, it becomes almost like liquid looking. So the ideal thing here for having some oil stains, but I'm not gonna have it all the way up. So I'm gonna slide it back down a bit, the roughness. So now what we can do is apply a smart mask to that folder. The smart mask already comes predefined with all sorts of generators and fill layers, and that makes it really easy and they look great. And then of course we can further adjust it if we want to. So the one I want to be using for this one here is the Dirt Leak Dry. As you can see, it already comes with these stains, so it looks perfect for something that you would expect to be a bit leaking, like in that case our oil. So let's drag that on here. And now let's take a look here at our mask, and is a bit strong. So we're gonna further adjust it. So let's look at it here from a different angle to get a better view on it. And here we can see it nicely, the oil that we were just adding. So let's take a look at it without, and just having that gives some extra contrast, especially on the roughness. But it's also quite noisy looking right now, especially here from that angle. So the main one that's responsible for that is the one here on top. And with that turned off, we still have it here in some selected areas, such as this here. And this one I'm just gonna leave turned off because otherwise it's too noisy. So now we can see that it's also forming up here in some of these regions, like these grooves here for the cylinder. Let's take a look here in our roughness for that. And I don't mind it here in those small ones, but for this big one, I actually don't want to have it there. So what I'm gonna do is add a new folder, press Ctrl G, that will automatically put the selected folder into a new folder. I'm gonna call it Oil Mask, and I wanna add a white mask to it. And then we can go over to our UV selection, put that to element mode. And first of all, I wanna get rid of it here where we have that grip. So I need that color to be black, and then we can get rid of it there. Let's keep that stain free or oil free, the grip. And then let's take a look here at that cylinder where I don't want to have it here in these grooves. So I'm going to have it here to the UV selection for it. And that way it's easy for us to just get rid of it. I actually think it might not be the worst to keep it in there. Like all the inner parts can have some oil on it. And here on top I think is too much right now. We don't want it to be so glossy there. I don't mind it here at these selected areas, but this part here, I want to get rid of it, and I'm gonna lock into it here from that side. Actually, let's leave it here with the UV selection mode, and then we can just make a selection like that and get rid of everything that's on top of that rail here, so that we just have it here on the side of it. So let's get out of this mode and let's just take another look around. And it's really only a few selected areas where we have it, but it just makes this nice extra contrast for us. So now that I think about it, let's go over here to our color view. There it is. And right now we don't actually see that we also have color enabled here. If we would further increase that, we would start seeing it. Now you can see it. But since we have it almost the same color as our paint here, I think we should just turn it off entirely. So that way, if we decide to ever change the color here on our base, the one for the paint, we don't have the issue to deal with that we have this color information here, which might somehow interfere with our overall look. So we're just gonna have that here coming from our roughness information, and it's pretty much almost the same look. So I disabled that here. And also I just spotted it here in our roughness view that we have it here in the inside of that trigger. So I'm gonna go back here and I want to be in our UV selection once again. And I'm just gonna get rid of it here. And also here, might wanna get rid of it for the trigger itself. We still have some roughness information here around the edges. That's perfectly fine. That's not coming from the oil, but that just adds to a nice contrast here on that metal. So let's continue with our next wear and tear, which is going to be the dust. And once again, it's not going to be much, but just subtle amounts. So let's put that to a darker tone. And maybe we can even have a little bit of red in there just by having that crosshair somewhere here and not entirely in the grayscale regions. So it's very subtle, but that way we get a bit more color in there. And the one that I want to be using for that is the dust occlusion. So I'm going to drag that on here. And you can see that some of these masks are actually pretty simple. Like this one only has the dirt generator on it. So technically we could have just done that ourselves, but sometimes they already come with like a lot of different fill layers and generators on top of it. So I really like these smart masks to quickly see if I like a result or not. And in order to see that, let's go over here to our channels. We can already see it's forming up a little bit in here. Maybe we can see it better if we go here to our mask view. Not only maybe, but this is always the best view to look at it. So now we see where that builds up. And I think I'm gonna actually have a bit more contrast on that, so that it's a bit more concentrated into some of these areas here. So let's take another look around. It works nice here together with our oil, but I actually want to drag that whole folder under our oil folder. So let's collapse that folder here just to make it easier. And then let's drag it under the oil. And that way, we now have the oil roughness information on top of our dust, because our dust roughness comes from the default fill layer material that we were adding, and that's a bit of a neutral roughness. So in that case, I want the oil to be on top of it so that we still have that same look. So this is very subtle, but we're gonna add a third wear and tear layer. So now we got our dust, we got our oil, and now let's add a bit of dirt. For that, I want to make use of a smart material, and let's use the one where it says dirt. So let's drag that on here. So now we gotta adjust that a bit because that doesn't look very good. So now let's take a look at what this smart material consists of. We got some height information on there, and also we have this mask already on it. So I actually want to disable that mask. You can do that by pressing Shift and clicking on it. And the reason is that we're gonna add a mask here on our upper folder, which we're gonna get here from our smart masks once again. So before we do that, let's take a look here at that material, and we can see that there is some height information on it, which comes here from our finish grainy. So disabling that will also turn the height off, and we can also turn it off here in the material itself, just so that it doesn't somehow interfere with any other height information that we might have under it. So then the next thing we want to do, and that's also the reason why I use this material, is because it comes with a gradient already. So you can see that these white spots here are coming from this color here. And what I want to do with that is change that to a more similar tone as the one under it. So pushing it here to the right side, it will also make it a bit more brown or orange looking. And this is really the kind of look that I want here. Maybe I'm gonna make it a bit more dark so that the contrast is not so extreme. But other than that, we have one material now that consists out of two colors. So that makes it a bit more interesting. And now let's take a look here at our smart masks. And the one that I want to be using for that is the dust plastic. So I'm gonna add that here to this folder, the one on top. And now let's zoom out. So now let's take a look at it in our mask here. And it just has this nice appearance overall. It looks almost like you were walking through some desert storm and it got blasted with sand. So I like how it contrasts with the other generators that we have, and it just makes it for a nice mask for our dirt layer. So let's look at it a bit from the front here, where we have quite a bit of this masking. And let's see how our roughness is affected by it. Right now it's quite strong. So what we could do is go into our material and we could just make use of the roughness slider itself. If we go down here. But what I also sometimes like to do is go over here to that roughness channel information, and then we can bring down the slider on our layer itself. Let's go over to the roughness view, and then we can go over here to that slider and affect it globally. So I'm gonna have it set to 30, and that way we just have more of our shine back. So now I was just noticing that our edge wear actually has a problem, and that's because this area here looks quite cut off. And if you remember, I'm just going to turn off the global wear and tear to make it more obvious. If you remember the last layer that we were adding, or the last mask, we didn't put it to triplanar. And first I thought we get away with it, but in that case it actually causes this problem. So I'm going to switch it to triplanar projection. And now you can see that it compensates out these UV seams. So this is exactly the effect that we want from the triplanar, and it's working. The only problem is that it washes out a bit the edge wear. This is something that can happen when you put it to triplanar. So I'm gonna add a filter, and then let's search for sharpen. And then we add that sharpen filter to get this crispy look back. It's a bit strong right now, so I'm gonna put it to a lower amount here so that it's not looking too pixelated. And other than that, I think we're quite getting there now. Let's put back on our global wear and tear. Let's have another look around here.